Hey, let's continue our study through the book of Second Corinthians. We are in chapter 9 today. Verse 1. Now concerning the ministering to the saints, it is superfluous for me to write to you, for I know your willingness, about which I boast of you to the Macedonians, that Achaia was ready a year ago, and your zeal has stirred up the majority. Yet I have sent the brethren, lest our boasting of you should be in vain in this respect, that as I said, you may be ready, lest if some Macedonians come with me and find you unprepared, we, not to mention you, should be ashamed of this confident boasting. So, real quick, he's talking about okay, the ministering of saints doesn't necessarily mean it's out there helping and being of service to others, helping each other, teaching each other, encouraging each other, being there to listen when there's someone who's going through a bit of a trouble, but then also helping out with whether it's financial means or through supplying of food or any type of supply. So the whole idea of ministering to each other and ministering to the saints is the helping each other out because we are all one body and the body helps each other out and do things together. So what Paul is talking about here is that, well, for one, the Corinthians had this knack of being able to provide for certain things, and we'll talk about that even through the rest of the chapter, how they were willing to be giving, whether it was financial means or for whatever supplies that was needed. And so Paul is telling them, hey, because you have promised that you were going to go ahead and provide to maybe let's say the people in Jerusalem, that you're going to go ahead and send some sort of gift to them. If the Macedonians come and some of them are going to come to pick up this, please don't make it look like as if you don't or you're not going to be following through what you said. That's basically what it is. Because, hey, you know what? Paul is commending them for their willingness to give, and they have done this, and they're loving with each other and being able to support each other, all the Jews and the Christians alike. Most likely Jews, but then they're also of the way, so they're Christians, right? So that's what that is. Let's continue. Therefore, with this verse 5, therefore, I thought it necessary to exhort the brethren to go to you ahead of time and prepare your generous gift beforehand. So basically, Paul's saying, hey, you know what? I told them, yeah, go ahead ahead of time so that you could pick up the gift, which you had previously promised, that it may be ready as a matter of generosity, not as a grudging obligation. So he's telling them, make sure that what you're giving is out of generosity, not because you have to. Um, but he was also basically boasting on their good deeds because they tend to promise of certain things, right? That they were going to promise to give. Anyway, so verse 6 says, but this I say, he who sows sparingly will also reap sparingly. And there's talking about the proverbs of, sowing the seed. Jesus even talks about it, that whatever you give, you're going to get a reward from that. And he who sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. So let each one give as he purposes in his heart, not grudgingly or of necessity, for God loves a cheerful giver. So the one thing about this, though, is some people take this out of context, but this whole God loves a cheerful giver. And yes, it says so. God loves a cheerful giver, right? But doesn't necessarily mean that people have to give all the time. It's basically giving what you can when you are able and to who is of need. And so the discerning of like who is of need is really a challenge here, which is why you should pray about it. But at the same time, you have to know, okay, we help each other out as the bodies of Christ. We help each other. We're family. Family members would really come first. As a parent, I'm not a parent, but those who are parents, your family comes first. And if you have any little bit of extra that you're able to help a missionary or the church, outside of the tithing that you already normally do, if you do tithe that way. Um, but it's saying here, hey, if you are able to help someone out, go ahead and do it, not begrudgingly. Do not do it as if like, oh my goodness, I have to give. No, it's just like, oh yeah, look, I have this. I'll be able to help someone out this time, right? Whether it's a missionary or someone from the church or another family member in need. All right, let's continue. Verse 8, and God is able to make all grace abound to you, abound toward you, that you always having all sufficiency in all things may have an abundance for every good work. Now, real quick here, all, always, all, the same Greek word applies to that. So, all grace abound toward you, always having all sufficiency in all things. And where does all this come from? Right? The grace, the strength that you're able to do. We have to remember that all things come from God, and He gives us and provides for us anything that we need. And at the same time, He sometimes gives us a little bit more. Why? Because we are supposed to be able to help each other out, help others who are unable to, or who's still a little bit of, whether it's a struggle kind of matter, or because, you know, we have different gifts and we have different abilities, and others don't have the same type of knack as others do, right? um Verse 9, plus also the different gifts. Verse 9, as it is written, He has dispersed abroad, He has given to the poor, His righteousness endures forever. God's righteousness, it all comes from God, right? So He gives gifts to others. And if we think about the parable about the talents, to one he's given 2 talents, to one he's given 5, to another he's given 10. And I think I've changed the numbers up a little bit, right? So not everybody has the same type of gift, or the talents, or the gifts, right? And as we dive deeper into the word, as we dive and keep seeking into the Lord, He gives us in addition more to what He has given, if we are faithful in what He has already given to us, right? And so now, as we attain more of these gifts, attain more of the blessings and the grace from God, and I'm not talking about necessarily about physical things or monetary things. I'm also talking about the spiritual, the mental, the just, other things that are provided, what you call that, brain matters, right? Techniques. I'm drawing a blank there. But as we are attaining all these other knowledges and skills, we should also be sharing it with others as well. Verse 10, now may He who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food supply and multiply the seed ye have sown, and increase the fruits of your righteousness, while you are enriched in everything for all liberality. So he's just reminding them again about how the Corinthian church loved to provide for others. They were able to give, and they were sharing what they had earned, or some of the items that they were able to share with other supplies. And so Paul's commending them, and not only commending them, he says, hey, you know what? I want a blessing on you too. Now may He, talking about Jesus, God, who supplies seed to the sower, who supplies all the things that can be brought to fruit, right? Bread for food supply and multiply the seed, right? While to increase the fruits of your righteousness. So not necessarily in abounding in more gifts and more physical or material things, but even the spiritual gifts that are being provided. He's asking, hey, may God provide more and may it abound, because you are loving and you love to provide liberally, right? It continues then, which causes thanksgiving through us to God. So basically, people are thanking God because of what they're doing and they're giving. Verse 12, for the administration of this service not only supplies the needs of the saints, but also is abounding through many thanksgivings to God. So once again, it's thanksgivings to God. Verse 13, while through the proof of this ministry they glorify God for the obedience of your confession to the gospel of Christ, and for your liberal sharing with them and all men, and by their prayer for you. So real quick, it's not just the liberal sharing, but also the confession of the gospel of Christ. What is the gospel of Christ? The good news, right? That Jesus came to fulfill the law and the prophets. We as human beings have inherited sin because of what Adam and Eve have done, and because of sin that separated us from God, and not ever, well, the sacrifices that the priests had to do in order to atone for those sins no longer has to be done when Jesus died, because He was the final. He said it was all finished when He died, gave up His spirit, and then He rose again from the dead. That's the gospel of Christ, that He came down as that sacrifice. So no priest is needed anymore to do any type of sacrifices in order to atone for sin, because Jesus did it. I think I already spoke way too much on that. Too much there. All right, let's continue. Verse 14. and by their prayer for you, who long for you because of the exceeding grace of God in you. Thanks be to God for his indescribable gift. And so, reminder is just the gifts that we have, even talking about these Corinthians here, is they were provided by gifts by God, from God, because of the good news, right? And so, even with the transforming of the mind, the soul, the spirit, because of that transformation, even with the spiritual gifts that are being provided from God through his spirit, we are also granted gifts by the things that we're doing, right? As long as it's been doing for God. Maybe I even overspoke that, and if I did, then please correct me. Anyway, so the gifts are to be shared with the others. It's not meant to be kept and held on to for ourselves only, because we each go through different circumstances. And sometimes the circumstances that we go through are a learning experience in order to glorify God and to see how God's going to move through us, and use that as a means to be able to encourage others as well who are also going through that same circumstance. Anyway, so another note also regarding this, because of the Corinthians' willingness to give, we should also have that sort of desire, because God continually provides for us, and sometimes even a lot more than we can describe or attain. And we ought to be able to share willingly, not begrudgingly, with others who may also need them. Anyway, any questions, comments, please leave them in the comments section, and y'all be blessed.